Hello, I'm Leroy Garcia, and this is Blue Rain Gallery Podcast. Today in our studio, we have another very young, talented artisan, mostly working in devotional art, Andrew Montoya. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, nice to have you. So we have a few questions, and I didn't ask you before this, so it's going to be raw.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
So what is your family's history of coming to New Mexico?
Yeah, so I consider myself gosh bless, now I think a third or even fourth generation Santa Fe, and my family grew up or was started originally in the village of Agua Fria, which is here in Santa Fe, and we were a farming community back then. Actually, my parish church, which is San Isidro Parish, was built in the late 1800s. Was built by my great grandparents.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I found that out just about a few years ago, which was really nice. I actually found some old photographs of my grandparents actually putting adobes together, and it was really neat and nostalgic to see that. So I've lived in Santa Fe pretty much all my life, born and raised there in the village of Agua Fria, and my grandparents, or at least from what I've known, there was some that started out in La Cienega, but we were originated from Spain, is what my grandfather would always tell me.
Mm-hmm. Do you know what years the family migrated into the territories over here?
Man, I don't. I asked my grandfather, who I just lost recently at the age of 102,
Wow.
if he could tell me where we originated from and how we got here. The majority of my grandfather's stories were all of his World War II stories. So yeah. I didn't get a lot of information outside of he called my great grandfather Jose Montoya, was actually, he called him Coyote.
No, so
yeah,
half and half.
So kind of half and half, because my great grandfather was actually over 6. I think he was 6'6", and
Wow.
he looked güero, blue eyes, really light skin.
So Hispano.
Yeah, and so I always wondered, where did that originate from, and why didn't I get that blessing? I wish I had the height, but my great grandmother's side, Isabelita Montoya, well, she was Velarde actually. She actually was originated from New Mexico too, but I think they might have migrated from Mexico. Not necessarily from Spain. So.
Well, a lot of our families on my Spanish side came via Mexico. Mm-hmm. They just didn't stay there very long.
Right.
They migrated here to the northern part of New Mexico and southern part of Colorado since the 1500s. So wow. You might start digging.
I've always wanted to do that ancestry me, or wherever you can find the lineage and how far it goes back. So I definitely need to do that. It's on my bucket list.
Yeah.
Because I would literally love. And funny that you asked that question. On my mother's side, I've always wondered, where did my artistic talent come from, right? And on my mother's side, her grandfather, which would be my great grandfather, supposedly was an artist and from San Luis Valley, in Colorado.
That's what I'm saying.
Right. And so some of his early work that I've seen has been some of the drawings and sketchings that he would do on potato sacks. And so I've always wondered and tried to identify. So I know that we're primarily from some parts of Mexico, but there was even some southern Colorado, San Luis Valley, that actually was also part of my mother's side. So it's nice.
I would assume that your family is like mine. We might even be related, but they all ended up in San Luis.
That's correct.
From Taos to San Luis.
San Luis Valley. Yeah.
When they first came here, they settled in Jacona, which is near Powake.
Wow. Okay.
And then they migrated into Taos and then San Luis Valley. And those are some of the earliest settlers.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to find out. So let's talk a little bit about you. When did you realize that you had art skills?
I would say I always loved to draw as a kid. Coloring, drawing was something that I enjoyed. I would say when I first identified my talent was probably when I started getting into almost middle school. I became the guy or the friend that could draw cartoons and could draw names in specific areas. And there was even like at that time, kind of tagging was something that was seen. Graffiti work was something that was seen. It wasn't on the scale of artistic ability. It was more of, that's really the bad stuff that you didn't want to be a part of.
Gangsta.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, but I used to be asked all the time to put my name on a board or put my name on a binder or a notebook. by all the people that I went to school with. And then it started to grow a little bit where people were like, oh, Andrew's got really good penmanship. Why don't we have him do all the diplomas for all the students, right? Or Andrew's got good penmanship. We'll have him do the yearbook and create a nice drawing for the front of the yearbook with the year. And so I would say that's kind of where I realized that I had artistic ability. I was, and we'll probably get into this, and I don't want to jump too far ahead, but I was forced into becoming an artist at the age of 9 when I actually lost my mother due to illness. And her sister, which is Santero Andrew Montoya, I always say that she kind of forced me into the art because she made a promise to my mother that she would keep me and my brother occupied during the summer times. And so we always had to go to her house during the summer and draw and paint, and I hated it.
That's why the style's similar a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. And you know, I hated doing it. All my friends at that time were going to swimming and basketball and doing all these different things, and I was forced to go to my auntie's house and paint and draw and I hated it. But that's where my art journey really began in formal art and trying to understand the concepts of it. But certainly I'd been drawing pretty much all my life.
So tell me about the evolution from going from 2D to 3D.
Oh God, it's miserable. I think one of the biggest things that I had to learn early on, my auntie at that time was painting using watercolor technique on panels, on boards, doing retablos, and I enjoyed it, but I really found a lot of influence in the sculpture. And at that time, I could see books that she would show me or things that individuals are creating, Jose Rafael Aragon and all these other Santeros from a long, long time ago. And I would see those and I would tell her, well, that's what I want to do. And she would tell me, I can't help you because I don't know how to do it. So originally I started out doing retablo work. And then my first exposure to the Santero carving or the bulto carving was actually at Spanish Market one year, where I saw Manuel Lopez. Actually was the first person that ever sat me down and said, you want to learn? Sit right here and I'll show you. He was creating this big St. James, almost as big as this table. It was huge. And it was, you know, I was just so infatuated by it because I was like, how does somebody create this person riding a horse out of a block of wood? Like I've always like been exposed to clay, you know, and clay, which is actually a pretty forgiving medium because you mess up, you just put it back on and start over. Wood was completely different. And that's why I say it's been miserable, because wood is one of those things that if you mess up a piece, you mess up a head, you mess up a hand, a foot, you're starting over from scratch. There is no, let me just put back the piece that fell off or the piece that I messed up. So it's been a journey, and I've enjoyed every second of it. But I would say that my love has always been in the 3D realm.
Yeah, well, you've picked up a count. Who are some of your superheroes?
Superheroes in the art world, or just superheroes in general?
Superheroes as far as influence on your work.
Influence on my work. My biggest, I would say, influences have been, of course, the European artists, right? I think I really fell in love with Bernini. When I realized that this was going to be something that I wanted to pursue, I realized that I had to educate myself. And that meant going to galleries, going to museums, reading books, documentary films. Of course, Da Vinci has always been there. You know, the Raphaels and all these people that have been involved in Europe with these amazing sculptures. And I've never been. I've only seen them all in videos or in books. But literally, Bernini was one of the ones that I fell in love with, mostly because he started sculpting at such a young age, right? And that was kind of like I could relate.
Yeah.
I started carving at the age of about 13, I guess, was when I kind of picked up a knife for the first time. And by that time, by his teenage years, he was already doing commission work for popes.
Yeah.
Right? So for me, I was like, oh God, man, that's the in my eyes, that was like the heavy, right? He was the one that I was like, oh, I want to be like that, man. That's awesome.
Where it seems like in your field, there's so much. How many saints are there? There's thousands.
Thousands.
You know,
yeah.
like the knowledge of learning about every one of them.
For sure.
That's pretty cool. We'll do a walk along in a few moments.
Absolutely.
And I want you to talk about some of the imageries that you're painting or
Sure.
producing in bultos or retablos and stuff. So I think the other questions that I would have for you would be like, where do you see yourself going in the next 10 years?
It's a good question. I've always thought about this. I've been doing artwork for so long. I'm 42, and I've always said, man, have I plateaued yet? Right? I think that's always kind of been in the back of my mind. I've had a lot of people ask me, why do you create so much art? You seem to be one of the few that produces a large body. A lot of times I go to other artists and they're maybe producing 1-2 carvings a year, but you seem to produce quite a bit. Why are you doing so much? And I've always thought to myself, eventually at some point they're going to put me out in the pasture, right? And say you can't do it anymore. At a professional level, you could probably do it, continue to do it if you want, but we're gonna kind of retire you. And I've always said I don't want to leave any work on the table, right? I want to make sure that while I can create, I will. So for me, it's always been a dream of mine to actually have a piece in the Pope's personal collection in Vatican City, Rome. It's definitely something that I'm looking forward to. I've had a lot of opportunity. It hasn't gotten quite there yet, but eventually it will probably. But I would say, for me, my goal in 10 years is to actually grow the art. I want to see the art continue. I do a large following with students or even kids that are interested in pursuing art, specifically in this medium. So I try to teach as much as I can. For a while there, I was really worried that Spanish youth market was going to go away.
Yeah.
There was very, very few kids that were actually continuing. And I'm happy to say that I've been a part of at least 10 to 12 students that have actually gone through youth market and continued to pursue that. So it's growing. It's definitely, I think we're up to 42 youth market artists right now, which is awesome. But I just definitely want to see in the next 10 years it continue to grow, and then eventually, like I said, I want to definitely see my art just continue. I think that there's room for improvement. I don't think I've plateaued yet. I still learn every day. Every piece is a journey for me, and there's a lot of mistakes that continue to be made, but they need to be made, right? That's how I grow. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Well, you're still very young, so a lot of major artists don't even hit their stride until they're in their late 50s.
Yeah. I hope so. I hope I have some more time to continue.
Well, as long as your hands work and you can,
Oh yeah, I try to take care of my hands as much as I can, man. They're like very precious. They do a lot of stuff, and I try to take care of them so that way I can continue to pursue and do the art.
I think that's commendable that you're taking interest in the youth. That the Hispanic community and devotional art is not the only art form that's having the issue, like getting new people or younger people. I see that in the Native community as well.
Right.
It just sometimes it's tough. Like, you're gonna make a living off your art? What? And I think about the Navajo weavers. It takes them a year sometimes to make a weaving.
Oh yeah.
And like, they're not getting paid for
a long time. Yeah, for sure.
So well, that is cool. I'm very impressed with you, and the skill level from the last time I saw you to now is just like super. You are growing.
Yeah,
and it's pretty cool stuff. Tell me a little bit about this bulto here.
So this is an image of San Rafael. San Rafael is always known as being the patron saint of happiness, or even the patron saint of travelers. He did one thing though in his lineage, in his story, that I incorporated with this piece, which is he's also been known as being patron saint of healthcare workers. That's why you see the staff on the top. Yeah, it's definitely made a little bit different. This piece really spoke to me for a lot of reasons. Number one, I'm a full-time nurse. So I've been doing healthcare for over half my life, right? I'm 42. I've been doing it for over 20 years now, and I've enjoyed every single part of it. But the archangel, at least for me, there's very many of them. Like you said, we talked about how many saints there are. The archangel for me has always been a good piece. It's not only to do it, but also because I guess I just have this feel of good wings and good faces. And it seems like every time I've done one, it usually sells relatively quickly. But this piece in particular was a little bit different than what I'm used to. A lot of early on in my career, I learned how to do really stiff, rigid images. That was usually what you saw from the older Santeros. Rafael Aragon had no movement. The hands were real stiff and still. The feet were stiff and still. And I really started to try to push an envelope a little bit and get some movement. I fell in love with the Baroque style, but the Baroque style had a lot of flowing gown, right? Like lots of big cloaks and folds and undercuts. And
that's why you call it Baroque?
Yeah, that's why you call it Baroque, right? And so I really wanted to try and figure out how I could incorporate the two, the simplicity of New Mexico and the way that it was done early on, and then also the Baroque theme that came from Europe that I really enjoyed. So that's really where this piece came from, and I'm really trying hard to figure out how to balance a lot of these pieces. on smaller little sections or smaller bases. I think that's always a big challenge. A lot of times the bases with a lot of the early artwork was never done like that. It was a single panel, very flat, no feet, no patas, no nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really try hard to give it a different feel and try to create something that makes people think, well, that's interesting. Look at how heavy it is on one side, or look at how far it extends, but it's on this tiny little ball. How? So I really enjoy doing that and incorporating that into my work. But that's really the story of the image, right? And why I chose to do it.
Well, I've been painting underneath, turn it over, painting all those little scenes in there.
Mm-hmm.
That's a challenge.
Absolutely.
So, I always have to tell all my friends, that come into our carvers. I have a great grandfather, Bernardo Mira y Pacheco.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of my grandpas. And there's a huge screen in the Cristo Rey Church on Canyon Road that he carved in 1750.
Jeez.
But he was one of the first Santeros that came to the New World over here in northern New Mexico.
Wow.
So it really has a strong influence. But he came as an artist. The King of Spain commissioned him to come here and do cartography. So he mapped out the entire Southwest through paintings. His maps were actually oil paintings and stuff.
That's amazing.
But his work, you can ask Victor Goler. It's all over northern New Mexico, little churches, little things, and here and there, little bultos,
that's awesome.
tableaus. Mm-hmm. Pretty cool stuff. Well, let's go downstairs and see more of your work and talk more about some of the imageries and things that you like.
Absolutely.
So we're down here with Andrew looking at his latest body of work. And as we just described this one, they're very colorful. You can see he's also done a monochromatic painting here. But I just, for our audience, to teach them or educate them a little bit about these saints and what they inspire in people. But let's start with this. This actually looks like Noah, right? Mm-hmm. And what do you like about that?
Yeah, so the Noah's Ark is actually not a very traditional image that's done, at least here in New Mexico. The New Mexico theme is very unique because I've always said it's very pastel looking. They're the same images, the same St. Francis, the same Joseph, the same Mary. You never really see a venture out into these other saints that actually had a wonderful life and did amazing things. So this piece was kind of neat. I as something kind of different, I elected to start doing some of these shadow box themes, which is completely outside of the realm of regular retablos, right?
Which more like flat.
Yeah, this would be more like the flat panels you're talking about. So I started doing these cool shadow boxes, and the Noah's Ark was just a cool image. I try really hard to incorporate my own style, and that's something that I had to learn really, early on. When you see Noah, he's usually inside the boat with all the animals, or if he's pictured outside of the boat, it's all the animals are going in and he's kind of standing outside of it. But I wanted to create this image of the boat and the wood actually, and him kind of sitting inside of a picture, but still have the animals with their faces sticking out of the holes.
Yeah.
So it's kind of just a different symbol, right? And the majority of all the images, you'll see a lot of them, they all have significance. You see the three crosses on top. Yeah. Those are always symbolic of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, or even Jesus being crucified on next to the three crosses.
So when you're doing this, do you do a pre-drawing of everything before you start construction?
Yes.
Or you just make the box and then you think, well, what can I put in there?
So the crazy part with even this image and a lot of these images is I have an idea in my head, and then even when I try to sketch it out in a lot of my sketchbooks, it's interesting because I'll go to the sketchbook and I'll put it next to the piece that's finished, and they're completely different. It just changes so many times. Originally, that piece actually was not supposed to have the animals put into it. It was supposed to be Noah just by himself, just in a black frame. And then it kind of just grew, and I started saying, oh, well, what happens if people get confused and they're like, well, who is that? And Noah's attribute is definitely the animals. So I had to incorporate that somehow so that way people wouldn't get lost and figure, I don't know who that is.
Well, let's talk about the black and white.
Yeah.
The monochromatic.
Yeah. I started this series back in the COVID year in 2020 is when I started this. I actually
the style or the piece?
The style itself, right? So back to the discussion that we were having, I found an image of my great grandparents actually putting adobe on a San Isidro parish here in Santa Fe, and it was a black and white image. It was obviously taken in the 1800s at some point. Right. And I thought, look how cool that looks. It's just so nostalgic and just looks so different. So I know there was some artists that were working originally in other colors, specifically in blue, doing monochromatic themes in blue and pinks. And I thought, man, I've never seen one really like in a gray and white. The problem that I had was when I did one for the first time, it was almost like a culture shock, because you almost have to train your brain. If you've been painting for so long in color, you must have to train your brain to say, well, what color needs to go what shade needs to go what? And then I started to realize you have to make enough of the shade so that way it matches. There was plenty of trial and errors with some of these pieces where I was painting pieces and I couldn't finish them because I didn't have enough of the same color, so I would almost have to start over. But the monochromatic theme is just really awesome. It's definitely a different feel. That's actually our version of the Apocalypse, which is a wonderful image. Like I said, you'll see that in a lot of my themes. Is there's not a lot of very traditional Santa Fe or New Mexico saints, right? They're really pushed into a different boundary with some that have never been seen.
Yeah, that's kind of an unusual scene. I recognize the dragons and then the title.
Right.
So they're very biblical.
Right.
Yeah, and obviously we have Pascual here.
San Pascual, yeah, that's him in his magic kitchen, right? I try really hard to incorporate what New Mexico kitchens look like, right? You'll see the garlic, the garlic, and even the chili ristras on the top. My great grandparents and my grandparents' churches, or not churches, their kitchens look like that.
Yeah, that's something my grandma.
Yeah, so I try to really incorporate those things and make sure that there's a relation, so that way people
Forgot
can say,
that Blue Mountain lard.
Yeah, no, I've seen that one. Actually, in the piece that I did for Mark, it actually has that. It actually has the Blue Mountain lard, and it also has the Folgers coffee can. So I did one for Market that does have those incorporated.
And some chicharrones.
I know what you're talking about.
Well, this is kind of unusual image as well.
Yeah.
A little bit. Tell us about this one.
Yeah, so this is the Saint Kateri image. I've really grown fond of Saint Kateri, mostly because of her native roots, right? I think that's being from New Mexico, and especially being an admirer of Native American art, and especially the pots or even some of the rugs that you've even talked about. I started really trying to figure out how could I incorporate some of those patterns, right? So I've really figured out how to make her really soft, I guess, if you want to call that. But the thing that I've, at least for what people have told me, collectors and clients have told me, is they love the color that I put into her, right? The Native American.
I love the color palette. Really nice.
So the Native American theme for her, usually when you look at pictures or images that are done, is she's very simplistic. She's got like that yellow ochre, or that kind of brownish cloth. But then that's it. You don't ever see anything outside of that. There's usually a lily, and the lily's white, but there's no other color tied to her. So when I started doing my Kateris, I started to figure out she needs color, man. I need to figure out how to pull the vibrancy into it. And so the color palette, it's awesome because it's a lot of cool and hot. But I've always, and you'll see that with all my images, is I always go into these really bright colors, which is not traditionally known. A lot of these pinks, a lot of the yellows, they're not the teals. These aren't traditional Hispanic colors, right? They're something that was never really used. Even the purples or the lilacs, they were never used, and they still aren't used in Spanish markets. So I've really tried to venture out and do some different stuff.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. And so I had another question. We can talk about this bulto here.
Sure.
But the preparation, the pre-prep on the wood from a bulto to a retablo, are you doing more gessos before on these, or how are you preparing them?
So everything from retablos and bultos is exactly the same. I actually, from a prep standpoint, nothing is different. Everything is still... I use 100% natural homemade gesso. So I use an animal hide glue, and then of course some marble dust, and also some gypsum, which is incorporated across.
Well, you can get that like shine on the fingers and stuff, and on the face.
Yeah.
And where did you learn that process?
So that process was interesting to learn. That was a fight, man. My Lord.
Because that's a really tough one for.
It is a very tough one. Homemade gesso, I think, when you're doing a flat panel, is relatively, I would say, easier. It's not easiest, but it's definitely easier. But when you start getting into gessoing a carving or a bulto, it's different because you're holding this large piece. It's not a flat panel. You're kind of turning it and getting the front, getting the back, inside, behind the hands, and so you almost have to kind of. It's a.
And you have to sand it too.
You have to. I sand mine to smooth it. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Because there are some.
So
instances,
that's even hard, like getting into the hands and the little crevices.
And so, because there are some instances where depending on how thick you make the gesso, it'll definitely look. A lot of the detail work will go away. So you got to get in there and kind of clean up if you can. But yeah, it's the same process. It's just totally different realms when it's flat compared to a 3D sculpture.
Well, tell us a little bit about this bulto here.
Yeah, so you'll see. I think there's definitely two Guadalupes that I have here. Guadalupe is one of my favorite images. Obviously, I'm even tattooed with it. But this image was kind of neat because traditionally she's known with her angel on the bottom. The moon's usually underneath the angel with the clouds, and I kind of wanted to do her a little bit different. You can see her hair is actually flowing outside of her gown instead of being tucked inside.
Yeah.
The moon, which is a really big attribute for her, I wanted to figure out how to incorporate it in the piece still, but actually people to it kind of takes them back to say, wait, oh, that's the moon. It's usually on the bottom. Oh, I like what he did there. But I titled this piece La Morenita, which is the brown-haired one, right? Or the brown-haired girl. So I've always had a following for her. She's definitely one of my patrons and an image that I love doing. And so I really enjoyed doing something a little bit different. And again, it goes back to what we were talking about with the San Rafael piece, which is a lot of this movement, but also how did they get the base to stand on such a small, tiny little spot, right? Because you figure this piece of wood that's coming on the top is heavy, right? So you got to kind of figure out, how do I balance it so it doesn't fall over? So it's definitely a cool piece, and I really enjoy doing it.
You know, that's a thing I find common with a lot of artists don't think about the engineering of what they're doing.
100%. And that's,
they're artists, but there's like engineers. That's a whole nother
right. And you talked earlier about kind of mocking up and stuff. Every piece that I do, like a lot of the pieces are mocked up, right? So when I build shadow boxes, I mock everything up to make sure that it's in the right spot. Because then I paint everything off, and when I paint everything off, I put it all back together. Yeah. So it's got to be right, because if it's not going to go back together. So I definitely do mock up as best
I like the cactus too on that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So they did a lot of great things on this piece.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I want to thank you for coming in. That's just a little brief preview of what Andrew's going to be doing for us, and we hope to have a long relationship with him. He's very talented.
Thank you.
And I'd like to encourage everybody to go to our website under blueraingallery.com under podcast, watch our podcast, or under any of the platforms from iTunes to Spotify or whatever. Also, I'd like to encourage you to go to our online store, bluerainprintshop.com, and bring art into your everyday life. Thank you. Thank you, Andrew.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.